Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another Cognism webinar. And if you're tuning in, let us know where you're tuning in from. That's always fun. And then if y'all want to share, what is a big win of the week? We always like to hear that. So that's always a good one. But this webinar today will be 45 minutes. We're going to dive right into it because you're here to hear what we have to say. But before we do go into that, Jen, how's your day going?
It's Friday. It's Friday. I'm happy. The weekend is near. I've got no complaints. How's yours going?
Same. I'm prepared for the weekend. How are things in Chi-Town?
I mean, they're rainy, but it's Halloween weekend, so we got that going for us. I'm really pumped to dress up this weekend with my husband. I am being Beetlejuice, and he is being Lydia from Beetlejuice. So we've got a really cute little couples costume going on. Are you dressing up?
I'm dressing up as literally I'm trying. What is the thing? I'm literally dressing up as a person who goes to sleep a lot. So I'm trying to think of what that is. So like PJ boy, I don't know. Like
yes.
that's literally gonna be me. You will see me nowhere besides.
Please make this hashtag PJ boy start trending. That'll be a great win for today.
Literally me, PJ boy. That's me. Anthony, what's going on? Thanks so much for coming to the Amp Up event. We appreciate you. And then everyone who's tuning in, let us know where you're tuning in from. Also, as well, if you have a win for the week, share it. And then I guess since it's Halloween weekend, if you have a costume that you're going to wear, let us know. And as we go into the intros and we pull up the slides here, Jen, now we have to ask, what is your favorite costume that you've ever done?
Oh, if you ever watched the show, I'm probably dating myself, Married with Children. Did you ever watch that show?
I'm not familiar with the show.
Oh my gosh, it's happening. It's been happening so much. Okay,
well, Ryan says he loves it. So you're good. You're good. And Jennifer loved it. Okay, I'm the loser. It's okay.
Okay, so Married with Children was this like mildly offensive show where it was like a family they followed, and the dad was a shoe salesman and the wife was very extra. Her name was Peg Bundy, and she always wore like ridiculous shirts. She had this big red hair. I dressed up one year and I absolutely nailed it. I give Peg Bundy vibes. So you'll have to Google it and look at it, and then I'll send you my picture version of it.
Okay, now I got to go check this out. All right. Fair. So let's dive into it. What we're talking about today is Q4 power plays. Now, before we go into this, I got to ask y'all this question, and it's okay. We're not going to dry snitch on you. On a scale of 1 to 5, 1 being like, yo, I need to like start getting it right now. 5 being like you're extremely confident. How confident do you feel to close out your Q4? I know some Q4s are end of Jan, but how do you feel about closing out your Q4 and closing your whole entire year out? 1 to 5, let us know in the chat. How are you feeling right now across the board? So, you're probably in this session because you're like, okay, what to do? So some ones. Okay, so the goal is right here is to help you all not feel a 1, at least get to a 3. 3 is reasonable. You got some control. So all of you here, the goal is that Jen and I are going to share some power plays that we've used in our sales cycle to get success and things that we're sharing today across the board to see success. So if you're feeling like a 1 or a 2, we want you to come out of the session feeling like a 3. So we're going to come back to you. But before we do that, if you don't know who Jen is, I don't actually really know what you're doing, but I just don't. Well, hey, you should be following Jen at this point. Jen is incredible. Former Challenger sale, now off on her own thing. I'm actually jealous every single day that I see you post and I see that you have AKA Demand Jen. It's unfair to everyone else out here because that is such a great name. I'm like, okay, yeah, I just have a J in my middle name, but that's about it. But Jen, tell us a little bit about yourself and we'll dive in.
This is why I'm trying to make PJ Boy trend, Morgan, because it's unique and it's you, and I love the vibe. No, thank you for that really nice introduction. I spent 18 years as a salesperson, not a sales leader. I was always one of those people that didn't see myself going into sales, but then became infatuated with how much there was to learn. So I spent time, as an account manager, as a new logo hunter, like selling big 7-figure deals, but have always sort of classified myself not as a sales expert, but just someone who is utterly obsessed with learning. So you'll hear me talk a lot about the mistakes I made and how that led me to think differently about how I ran my Q4 plays.
Awesome. Yeah, Jennifer, I'm jealous as well. You know, I mean, we'll figure it out, Jennifer. We'll get something. We'll get some cool for us. I'm PJ boy now, so I don't know how that's. I don't know that's gonna sell, but like,
It could be private jet boy. It could be pajama boy. Like you got range. You
I
got
actually like that. I appreciate that. I appreciate that. And if you don't know about me or the show, I am Morgan, founder of AMP. We do video content and event activations, and I'm also a creative advisor for Cognism. And that's what I'm hosting here today. So if you haven't been here before, welcome, and we're going to dive into the show. Now, before we do anything, you got to know what you're going to learn here today. So how to bring your deals back to life. I think that's important. If they're dead, right, in this spooky season, we're going to help bring it back. Creative strategies for selling. Ton of stuff we're going to dive in there. And then how to not annoy your buyers in a busy season. All right. We don't want to annoy people. So we're going to dive into tactic number 1, which is to send a video. Now, let us know in the chat if you sent the video before or you haven't. And I'm going to walk you through how this is going to be massively beneficial for you all moving forward. And before I go into this tip, if you have questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A. We're going to answer them throughout the session and also at the end, but just want to make sure everybody's good there. So if you haven't sent a video at all, or maybe you've been thinking about it, this has been like the number one way that I've been able to revive a lot of deals. All right. They basically just called me Dr. Ingram because I was just reviving deals left and right. They're like, yo, this guy's crazy, right? Didn't get a PhD, but look, you know, we got some deals back. So the way that I go about this is everyone in here probably has a CRM. If not, that's already problematic. But if you have it, or a spreadsheet, whatever you're using, go look at all your contacts and say, okay, what did I say to them, or what was the reason that the deal was lost? So we would have in the CRM, when I was in JB Sales Days and when I was at Terminus, we would have a description of like, why did we lose this deal? So I'd go back and see like, okay, was it timing? Was it budget, etc.? And I use that as the clue to reach back out. And then I'd quickly go and look at their website or their LinkedIn to see like, what have they done since we last talked? So I just say like, maybe they're hiring more sales reps, use a sales training example. And maybe they said that timing was off. So I'd send a video, less than 60 seconds, 45 seconds, and say, hey, the reason I'm reaching out is I know last time that we chatted, timing was off. However, I looked at your website and noticed that you're hiring some new sales reps, and maybe now is the time to reconnect. We've been working on some new material that helps people with cold calling, and just wanted to see if you'd be open to a conversation. Super simple. So I would send a lot of those, right? And I'd get a ton of meetings across the way. And what I'd recommend is when you send these videos is to block out time. So on Friday, I just block out an hour, 2 hours, and send out, make all the videos. And then I'd send them on Monday afternoon or Tuesday morning. Now, here's a really important tip for everybody listening in. If you want to recover your deals, I think that's important for everyone, right? Is you want to send your videos before work happens or after work is over. If you send them during the day, most people are not going to watch them because they're in meetings. They don't have time for that. So I send them again before like 8 a.m. Yeah, even 7 a.m. I get them to watch it, and then after, right, 5 p.m. Best way to think about this is most people, and some people do this and they probably get fired, but most people are not watching Netflix or a movie during work, right? They're not doing that, or you're gonna get fired, right? And, you know, there's some risk takers out there, but they're not gonna do that. And so that's why I send it before or after, because that's when people are consuming certain things. I've actually found in the afternoon was way better because they're going through their emails like, oh, I have time to watch this. Please do not send it during the day. It's not going to help you. You could go against my advice and try to like, oh, well, Morgan, I would not recommend this. I've sent over 10,000 videos. I'm telling you, don't do that. So before the morning, 7 a.m., 8 a.m., and then after, I say like, 5:30, 6:30, really good slot there. Even Sunday afternoon, great time to send a video as well because people are going through their emails. But sending a video is going to be key. Jen, any tips on this that you want to add?
No, I have questions because you're the master. Okay. So first of all, I never thought about it that way, but you're exactly right. When I get a video in the middle of the day, I always am like, I'll come back to it later. And then by the end, it's down in Forgottenville. So I love that tip. You talked a lot about videos in Toronto and opened my eyes to a lot of things. What is the single biggest mistake that you see sellers making in Q4 as it relates to sending videos?
Okay. In this, when they have someone in the sales cycle, or they're just trying to get net new, or we're just talking about in the sales cycle?
In sales cycle.
Okay, so I'll give two. I'll give two approaches, and I'm telling you why it'll answer your question.
Sure.
Because there's a strategy, which is the number one mistake, and there's a technique that's the number one mistake.
Cool.
So the strategy is, and I honestly, like, if y'all need to write this down, because like this changed the game for me, and it accelerated deals pretty quickly. After you get in a conversation, you all know you get the decision makers. There's like 3-4 people on the call. There's always someone or two people that are just skeptical. I don't know. They're not about it. They just don't like what you're saying. So, but they're not going to call you out in front of everyone unless they're that person. It rarely happens. So what I did is I connect with them on LinkedIn, or if I have their email, that's fine. And I send them like a 10 to 15 second video. And it's like, hey, thanks so much for hopping on the call today. I know that I just went over, X, Y, and Z. Were there any questions or concerns that you had that I can address with you directly? I know being in a big group, you may not have been able to say what you needed to say. Okay, so boom. So people come back, you're like, hey, you know what, Morgan? That thing you said about the product, that made no sense to me. All right, cool. So now we can have the conversation and we can figure that out. Or some people like, you know what? Hey, I'm all good to go. Thanks for sending this video. And so now I'm going to address concerns and obstacles before they even get back to the big meeting they're going to have to talk about the conversation. And they're going to be like, oh yeah, Morgan sent me a video. Like, oh, we already answered that. So now they can get the decision faster. So look, if you're not doing that, you're completely missing out, because that's where a lot of deals do die, is that people have concerns. They have things that they have in their mind. And if you don't call it out or address it, it's game over. In terms of the technique,
Hold on one quick second. One quick
yeah,
second,
go
because
ahead.
I've never thought about using video in that way. And
Yeah.
I think what I love about what you said is the delivery in a video probably lands so much better than typing that out, right? And
Oh,
it's like,
100%.
you need to have that, like, I'm not just trying to get you to say something so I can objection handle you. Like, I can picture in my head what that video set, like the tonality of what that video sounds like from you. I imagine that has a much higher yield rate than like sending that in a text version or a written version. So I love that. Love
Yeah,
that.
100%. You can start using it. There you go.
I will.
and so that it changed the game. And I'll add this as well. Like, if someone, I always like to get phone numbers in all my sales cycles, but sometimes people don't want to do that. So now I've just been collecting Slack connects, right? And then you could send a video clip to them in Slack, right? If they don't set the LinkedIn, they might be too hectic. Some of you might be going after IT, cybersecurity. They might not be as active. So I might say, hey, just connect with me in Slack. That's like way more frictionless. And then I could still send that video clip, right? And if they don't even watch the video, it automatically does the transcript, right? So there's just a lot of levers to that. And then in terms of the tip, I find that people, they don't, how's the best way to put this? And Jen, you probably see this a lot. And I was talking to someone, literally, I was talking to Julia Card about this the other day, and I was just like, why do people do this? Talk to the video as if you're talking to a person, not as if you're being held at gunpoint as a hostage. So the thing is, you're laughing because this is what most people do videos. They're like, hey, my name is Morgan and I work at AMP and we were founded this year under the pre-context of the fourth declaration. And it's like, what are you taught? No one speaks like this. Like, what are you saying? I'm so confused. So it's just ridiculous. And so, yeah, when the number one tip I give to people is like, be in flow as if you're having a normal conversation, as if you're doing a normal cold call, and that will resonate more with people. When you overthink it as if it's this massive production at interrogation point, yeah, you're going to sound weird. And so that's my 2 cents there.
Okay, Jennifer also has a really good question here. She said, super tactical question. Do you just copy and paste the link to the video, or do you say something along with it? Like, do you type out, thank you for today, here's a quick video?
That's an excellent question. What you said on the latter end, so I found to be helpful. If you have a good relationship with someone and send a video, that's fine. So for example, if I send Jen a video, she's gonna be like, okay, I know Morgan, let me see what he has to say. But if we didn't know each other, she'd be like, this is a cool video, but there's no context. She might not click it. So I always say, thanks for today, thanks for the meeting. If there's something that the person said that was insightful, I'll add that too. Maybe there's a question they asked and like maybe we went back and forth on it. And I always add context. So Jennifer, great question. And then Anthony, your question, do you have data on video versus written for that follow-up email you sent to a single thread? I would say statistically, the video has a better, it has a longer response and the deal moves faster. So what I mean is, if I do it via written, some people are like, no, I'm good. If it's a video, they say thanks for the video and they say more, which then they're more engaged, which then leads to faster sales cycles. So that's at least what I've seen. Okay, cool. So you got the video. My next one is really, really quick, and then we're gonna move on this one, because this was a game changer, y'all. Like, I still use it today. I actually just used it today, and I got someone back in a deal. Like, I'm still using this. So John and I always use this, and it's called the "Did I lose you?" And the way that it works is, if you're like in an email thread on like Gmail, for example, and you've been going back and forth with somebody, and all of a sudden they just go dark, they go ghost. You follow up, and you're not getting anything. So the way you get someone back is you go inside of whatever you're using and you click edit subject line, and then you reply all, and then you just change the subject line to "Did I lose you?" and you put nothing in the body of the email. The reason that works is because they're going to see all the emails that they did not respond to. So it makes them feel bad, and psychologically they're like, I need to respond to this person, because no one wants to feel like they've been lost or they're like giving up on something. And so that has led to a crazy response rate. I think it's like 75% response at this point.
Wow.
From tracking it for the past like 4 or 5 years. Like, it is my go-to if all else fails. Now I have another one that I could share, but I don't know if everyone's ready for that one. But
Ooh.
uh,
Now we all just want to hear it.
I don't know. Y'all might not be ready for it. I gotta get people gotta act like really want it. Because it I don't know. It might not be it for some of you. But the "Did I lose you?" all you do is you edit the subject line and you put "Did I lose you?" and then now everyone else can see everything across the board. So that's the "Did I lose you?" email thread.
Love it. We're getting some more questions about the video stuff. Not surprised, because I think we're all trying to learn here. Do you use Loom or something similar for the videos?
Okay, so I love Vidyard. First video I ever sent was Vidyard in late 2016. So I'm a huge fan. So you can use either or. However, I love Loom, and here's why I love Loom, because it's a little bit different. As a business owner, there's a ton of walkthroughs, a ton of SOPs that I have to build. And for what I need to do as a business owner, it's actually easier to use Loom to build those SOPs and systems for the team. And then I also could use that for selling as well. So that's what I use Loom for. However, I'm not against it all Vidyard. They both work well together.
Sweet. We're getting some SendSpark love in here too. Definitely share it. Yeah.
I've heard about them. All right. So, okay. I'm going to share this one. Jen, you're going to laugh at this one. You can use it if you want. When I go a little bit outside of the box, I always say, hey, look, you don't have to do this. I'm not saying this is best practice. I'm just telling you what I did, and it works really well. And it may not work in your region, but I always give context, because people are like, that would never work in my. Okay, I get it. That's what I'm telling you. It may not work, but I'm telling you this one's heat. So Ryan's asking, what do you do if they don't respond to "Did I lose you?" Rebecca's like, I need to know what this is. All right. And it's very timely. So if they don't reply to the "Did I lose you?" or like, I'm just feeling spicy, what I'll do is I'll reply to the email thread. I'll edit the subject line to I'm laughing because it's so ridiculous. I put I put Casper and I put the ghost.
Oh.
and then in the body of the email, I put like, okay, let's say Jen ghosting, right? I put like, hi Jen, are you ghosting me? And that's literally it. So again, it's very bold. It might not be for everyone, but it's got a 90% reply rate. So look, I'm gonna keep writing it, but it is my go-to. Everyone laughs though. Everyone laughs. And either they're like, some people are like, yo, I was ghosting you. My bad. Let's talk. Or they're like, yeah, I was ghosting you because like timing's off, right? But you get a response. So look, bold move, works out. You can try it if you want.
And this is all about knowing the personality of your buyer, right? Like, there are plenty of tools out there now, like Lavender does it. Humantic does it. All these tools can give you a read on what someone's personality. If someone is like super rational and not like, and you get a read that that's probably not the move. But I think one of the things that
No.
you do really well is you have a great ability to read your prospect. And
Mm,
sometimes we just take everything so seriously, it becomes a nuisance to deal with us. So I think that's a perfect example of just knowing your buyer. You know what you can get away with. And that's probably why you get a great response rate to it, because you use it appropriately, not just like as a blanket push to everybody.
exactly. Yeah. Like, look, if I did that with like HR, maybe data management, that's probably not it. I don't recommend that. With marketing and
CFO.
sales, it seems to hit. But again, the whole point is you don't have to do exactly what I said, but think about
Yeah.
ways to interrupt people's patterns. Y'all, that's like the purpose here, right? Like, how do you interrupt people's patterns and make them think about it differently? And so John and I always used to do that. We always used to be like, yo, like, okay, what can we do that's a little bit outside the box, but it's not crazy, but it's different. It's gonna be like, yo, what's going on here? So that's the way that I would think about that across the board for anyone that wants to try something different. But the did I lose you? You could prep this up literally today, right? And start sending some did I lose yous. Again, go to that piece. Now, here's actually before we move to Jen's play, this is so important because this is where people go wrong. Do not send this to people that are prospects and have never replied to you. Okay. People have done this and they're like, wait, Morgan, I thought I could just, no, you never had them. How could you lose someone you never had? Okay. So make sure that you don't send this to prospects. Okay. Because this is where it goes absolutely wrong. If you had no conversation, please do not do this. And if you do, you didn't hear it from me. You heard it from someone else. All right.
Me.
You didn't get this in this session. All right. You got it from maybe Aiken. No, I'm just kidding. We're not gonna throw Aiken off like that. But like you didn't get it from me. All right. So that's the key. You have to send it to somebody, right, that you've had interaction with. You're in a sales cycle. Did I lose you? You've had conversations, etc. That's
I
important.
love what Dan wrote. People who have never responded are not ghosting you, they're ignoring you. Good difference right there.
That's a good point. That's a
Mm-hmm.
good point. For all stages of life.
True. Dating. It's a whole separate webinar.
Yeah, this is not power plays for dating. Okay, guys, like that's we don't want to go there. Those are
Oh,
different plays.
not today.
Not today. All right, Jen. So anything you else want to say on this email thread before we go to you?
No, let's keep it moving.
All right, cool, y'all. So now we're gonna toss it to Jen's play template if you're waiting for a contract signature. All right, Jen's gonna give us some money. So talk to us.
Okay, so this is probably like if anyone follows me, like I try to share a lot of like, here's what I say, here's what I do. This is probably the single thing that has resulted in more people coming back to me saying like, I actually tried it and it worked. And they always say it like, I'm so surprised it worked. Like I don't post stuff that doesn't work, y'all. But this is this is the one that I think I got the most off of. So if I like think back to when I was an AE, it's end of October. I've got a forecast I've committed to, and I'm like looking at my next manager one-on-one, being like, I really don't know what's going on with this deal. I owe them an update. I would always take one of two strategies. So either I would take the like handling fine china strategy where I would send an email and I'm like, I'm so sorry to bother you and I hope you're well and I don't mean to trouble you, but is there any update on the contract? Thinking like it's this fragile thing that will break apart if I use the wrong word or wrong phrase. That was one. Or I'd swing the pendulum all the way to the other side when I was more confident about the deal, come in like a wrecking ball and be like, what's the update on the contract? Both of those suck because they are so self-concerned, right? So it's very clear when I would go back and I'd read those notes, it was very clear that my motivation was to get my win, not theirs. And so after getting it wrong enough, I tried to come up with a template that would be, or maybe framework's a better way, framework that would allow me to be far more buyer focused instead of far more like Jen wants to hit her goal. So I
Right.
put it here on the screen on the left. I'm going to start on the right to walk through the framework, and then I'll tie it back to the email and we can talk about it. So one of the things I think I neglected a lot as a seller is just how hard it is to be a buyer. Like buyers have full-time jobs and buying is something they're doing on top of it. So sometimes unintentionally, we as salespeople can come across as really self-serving because we're like, well, where's the contract? Where's the contract? not recognizing these are human beings with families and jobs and struggles and all these things. And so it's really alienating. And I think what that ends up with is that it creates distance between the AE and the buyer, because the buyer's like, I see you, you're in it for you. So the way that I organize the framework is, first and foremost, acknowledging the pains of change. I don't care what we're selling. No matter how great the ROI on the other side is, it sucks to buy. So we have to lead off with an empathy that shows that we understand that. So the way I phrased it here is, you've been an absolute hero working through the contract review. I appreciate it's a grueling process, right? That shows I'm not naive to think it's just sending a piece of paper to someone and they sign it. The second part, this is very intentional. So one of the things that I'm very diligent about is I try to run a series of plays across every size sales cycle that is somewhat similar, because by doing so, it forces better behavior in the beginning. So what I mean by that is, the second part of this framework is reminding them of something we call the cost of inaction. Cost of inaction has nothing to do with our solution. Like, if you are framing a cost of inaction such as, by not buying our solution, you're not seeing a 10 times return, that's not cost of inaction. That's just inverted ROI. If I cannot write this section of the email, that is actually a red flag to me that I've fallen down earlier in the sales process. So that's why I'm a big fan of like running common plays, because then I can look back and say, okay, here's where I fell down. So this sounds like this. Was reflecting on the story that you shared, read the $5 million of Q4 pipeline that was lost to status quo. That has nothing to do with my solution. That is a intense problem that the prospect shared with me. Then I'm making it feel painful now. One of the other mistakes I made is, it was like, it'll help this thing in the near future, the distant future. People don't care about that. People care about what hurts right now and how do I fix it. So I'm taking that $5 million pain and I'm contextualizing it around the now. And that sounds like this. If the team could have converted just 25% of that, you said the business would have crossed its Q4 target. So that is making someone realize this thing that feels like this big unsolvable pain, it's the reason you are where you are right now. And so I don't think any seller can necessarily create urgency. We can expose or illuminate urgency. And that's the intention here. It's to bring it back to the problem, not to the upside of the solution if they do something. Last and finally, it's invite the answer we don't want to hear. Morgan, you shared, right? Like it's that elephant in the room moment where we don't want to hear a no, but we have to hear no's. It's part of this job. If we're not hearing no's, we're not doing the job. So it is better, in my opinion, to hear something we don't want to hear than nothing at all, because it allows us to use our time wisely. And so that sounds like this. Have you hit an unexpected roadblock that will affect our plan to hit that number for Q1 or reduce that number for Q1? And the last thing I will say about the intentionality behind this, like the words here, is, have you hit an unexpected roadblock is making something else the enemy. If I say, Morgan, were you unable to get the contract signed? Morgan has to say, yeah, I screwed up. I couldn't do it. I failed. People don't like saying that. I don't care who you are. No one likes being like, I suck. I got it wrong. So what this allows the buyer to do is to point at something else and say, yeah, John in procurement threw up a big red flag about the payment terms, and I'm trying to work through that. Great. That's information that allows us to know what to do now in regards to that deal versus getting it on December 22nd when now we've got to scramble. So you don't have to copy and paste these words exactly. I'm always a big fan of saying it's the framework and intention behind it. Make it your own. If this doesn't sound like you, do not use these words. But this was one of the things that once I started changing it, I was able to get actual true information and insight into what was happening in the deal so that I could do something about it with enough time to close it.
I absolutely love this. Let us know in the chat if you found this to be helpful. I think this is great. And I think one thing I want to call out that you're talking about is, I think most people will just do 1 and 2. They'll just be like, hey, you've been great. Here's this pain. Sign. Right? Like, it's like, okay. Right. A 3, I think most people don't do, right? Inviting them to be like, hey, like, what's going on here? Let's create a conversation instead of just saying, hey, you just need to go do this thing. And so I like that you're inviting them in. And I feel like as sellers, we don't invite people in. We just want to invite them into our DocuSign or whatever we have.
It's the same thing you said with your video to the skeptical stakeholder, right? Like, I
Right.
do think it is a core tenet of a successful seller is that we run to the uncomfortable. You do that so you can get actual information that helps you understand what am I going to be up against. I
Yeah.
do that in this email because if I don't know something, I'm unable to effectively work a deal. So I think that's something I wish I learned much sooner in my career is like, don't be scared of the bad news. You gotta make it safe for a prospect to tell you.
That's an excellent point. And as this is our third and final tip, y'all. So if you have any questions, now is the time to start asking them, and they can be outside of this topic too, since we have the time. I have found that when I trained so many people, they were afraid of getting bad news, and I was like, okay, but which is worse, getting bad news or not hitting quota? And it changes the way you think
Yeah.
about things then. And you're like, okay, well, I'll get the bad news because at least you can go work on another deal. You could at least figure it out. So I struggle with that too because I was like, I don't want to hear bad news. I just want to only hear the good news, right? But then it's like, well, if I'm getting ghosted, ignored, Dan said earlier, that's already the bad news. So let me just go ahead and figure it out, right? By inviting them in. And I love that you broke that down.
Yeah, information is power, right? And it's like again, I think you articulated that so well. If this buyer comes back and is like, "Yeah, turns out like my head of CS totally opposes this idea." Well, great. Now I'm not sitting there every single week being like, "Where's the contract? Do you have any updates on the I can put that
Is that
energy towards
is that
talking
the is
to these
that the
people.
voice that comes through when you hear that?
It
Where's
was
the
for me. Where is
contract?
it? Are you have you signed yet? Like they're probably like, "Can you go elsewhere?" So
Oh my goodness. Anything else you want to expand on here, Jid, before we get into the questions that people have presented?
nope. I think that's it.
All right, y'all. So let's get into the questions. This is your time to ask. So, boom, team's already on it. Okay, so with point two, so going back to the whole entire play you just talked about, work from an MDR, BDR, SDR's perspective. They inquired but never got back to us.
Yeah, 100%. And I love, Rachel, that you're thinking like this, right? So often we see a play contextualize around a moment, but it's exportable to other moments. I would run into situations a lot when I was selling Challenger. When I would get an inbound, they wouldn't respond. And I'm like, what the hell? You reached out to me. Like, what did I
Yeah,
say? Something stupid,
yeah.
right? But I think particularly right now, and I'm sure everyone listening is feeling this, things are moving so fast. So a project that is funded today can easily be yanked tomorrow as companies are in real time trying to adjust what their anticipated performance is for this year. So I think when it's also very okay to say, I have a hypothesis around maybe something that happened, but I recognize I don't see it all. So can you tell me how far off I am? People appreciate us trying and making an effort and not always being like assuming that they're interested and they just haven't got back to us. And they'll correct us if we're wrong. So I love that you asked that question, Rachel.
Awesome. Rachel, let us know in the chat if that helped answer your question and we can come back to it. But we're going to move to the next one. And so the next one here is not sure if this is the right time, but what's the best way to push past discovery first call?
What does that mean?
So,
I'm
so I
not
think
sure I understand.
I think the clarification here is I'm I'm getting on my first call and I'm not getting next steps. They're ghosting me. Brian, clarify if that's what you mean. That's what I'm think that you're saying is that like how do I make sure that I get the next step? How do I make sure that I get the second call? I'm getting ghosted after the first call, or they tell me they're not
Ah,
interested. My discovery is off. This is what my assumption is. Oh, yeah, Brian. Okay, cool. That's what he's saying. So, yeah,
okay.
like I can't get past the first call. My discovery is not where it should be. And people are ghosting me when they just say follow up.
Okay, I love this question because there was a period of time in my sales career where I had probably the worst conversion rate from first call to second call, and it was a very clear reason why, but I couldn't tell I was doing it in the moment. What I was doing in my discovery calls is I was asking, again, self-serving questions to determine fit. So, for example, when I was selling Challenger, like, how many sellers do you have? Like, when's the last time you've had training? And it was all relative to my solution. So for me, that's great. For the buyer, that buyer is probably having 4 or 5 other conversations like this. It is an absolutely giant waste of time for a buyer to spend their time answering fit related questions. And so what I did is I said, I'm going to try something else. And so I went in and said, instead of using discovery to determine fit for me, I'm going to approach at discovery in the sense of like, can I help this prospect discover something about themselves that has nothing to do with our solution, but ultimately leads to our solution, so that the conversation, they walk away from it being like, wow, I've been wondering why we've been struggling with this. Now I have an idea. And that advances me farther in my thinking, not to buy, but in my confidence to shape and advocate for the problem. And so my best recommendation, the simplest way I can put this, is look at your, call recordings for your first call. Are the questions that you're asking all contextualized around your solution and determining fit? Or are you actually bringing something to that conversation that allows someone to look at their own business in a different way? And I'll give a very quick example just so it's not like pie in the sky theory. When I was selling Challenger, which is sales training, instead of going in and being like, okay, how big's your team? When's the last time you have training? What do you want in a solution? And doing that, which everybody else was doing too. I would go in and say, one of the things a lot of sales leaders have underestimated is just how many deals they're losing to no decision. And it's hard because sellers don't mark no decision as the close loss reason. They mark it as like price, product, competitor, whatever. And so here's a different way to look at it in size to see if you're having that problem. Go in your CRM and add up the total pipeline value for companies that are in a forecasted pipeline that have not had a conversation with a sales rep in the last 45 days. And then let's come back next week and you tell me what that number is. And I remember doing this with a Fortune 500 company. They came back and they said, we never looked at our data that way. We had $90 million in forecasted revenue that hasn't had a conversation in the last month. And so the intent there is not to say like, that is a reason to buy, but it is a reason to act on that issue. And now you've moved in a position where they're like, so what do we do? And it gives us like a much different tone to that conversation than vendor pitching something. So I hope that example is helpful just as a way to bring that together.
I love that. And I'll co-sign to what Jen is saying. And I know some of y'all probably follow him. Shout out to KD. And if you don't hit him up and tell him that I sent you. And we were in a mentor mentee session, and he was saying like, why are you asking these questions? The same question you say, like, why are you asking how many reps they have? And I was like, well, I need to know. He's like, but is that going to help you close a deal? And I was like, probably not. When you say like that, probably not, right? Like, I don't like, oh, we won the deal because we found out they had 50 reps. And he's like, every question you ask, you need to get an answer that helps you close something. And I remember that being one of the most game-changing conversations I've ever had, because now every sales call I go on, I'm like, every question I ask is leading towards how does this lead to helping them, obviously solving the problem, but closing the deal. And if it's a question that doesn't do that, you shouldn't be asking it. I thought that was just fantastic piece of advice he gave me, and that's exactly what Jen's saying there. So for Brian, hopefully that helps answer the question for what you were looking for as we go right into the next one. So Dan, shout out to Dan. What is the best thing you can do when you feel a deal is starting to slip into the dreaded thing with the status quo? Oh, this is a good one.
Do you want to start? Or do you want me to start? I'm happy to do either.
Okay. So I'll tell you what you should do in this scenario, and I'll tell you what to do to avoid the scenario. And I just had a call with someone on Tuesday, and this is a question that I always use, and then I'll tell you how to ask it so it doesn't seem aggressive. So what I ask people is like, I'm a very, like, if you follow my content, I'm a very like time management, time blocking person. So about like 22 minutes into the call, 23 minutes into the call, right before we go into next steps, I say, hey, look, this question might sound pretty crazy, but what happens if you don't make this decision? So then this is again, this goes back to what we just said earlier with Jen, is like, most people don't want to ask that question because they could be like, nothing happens. I don't care. I've had people answer that way. But majority of the time, people are like, well, if we don't get this done, like, my job's on the line. Okay, so I don't know about urgency, but that's pretty urgent, right? And so I asked that question, and now I know they probably can't stick the status quo. So I asked this question earlier this week, and he said, I absolutely want to do this, but he's like, my CEO, it's not his number one priority, but like, he also knows that we should do it. So now guess what happens here? I say, okay, so what are the top 3 priorities, right? And then now I can then identify 3 priorities that could lead to what I'm actually trying to sell them, right? And now I can create urgency off of that, and or drive urgency because I uncovered it, right? And so that's the way to do that. But if I see that it's coming into the status quo, I'm going to dive a little bit deeper into like what they're actually doing and seeing like, is that going to be sustainable in the next 12, let's say 6 to 12 months, right? Because for directors and above, they're always thinking 6 months plus. So I have to say, okay, that's going great right now, but I'll use it in a sales training lens. Are goals going to increase next year? Yeah. Okay. So based on what you're doing right now, is that going to help you hit those goals? No. All right. So we probably should talk about this, right? So you have to figure out where in the future they're going, because you can't just stick with the status quo if you think something else is going to happen, right? And then it goes downhill. So that's my
I
2 cents.
love that, because you get to the real answer without directly asking the question. I think that's
Yeah.
it's the subtlety of that makes that magic. I'll give credit more Aseline, who is someone I follow on LinkedIn. He shared 2 questions that he asked that I think are brilliant, and he asked them in the call. So the key here is being proactive. It's much harder to respond reactively once you've already sensed it. It's much, in my opinion, much better to get ahead of it. So when he's at the end of like a group call or even a solo champion call, what he asks is, first, is this now that we're at the end of this conversation, where have you landed on whether this is a problem worth solving? Now you might get yeah, this is totally a problem worth solving. Where the beauty is his second question. He says, and are you confident feeling this is a problem worth solving right now? And
Mm-hmm.
that's where we get honest answers, right? Like I could get, and this is a mistake I made a lot. I could get an answer of like, yeah, it's a problem worth solving. I'm like, put that baby in the forecast. Let's make
Yes.
that money.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But when you ask the right now, you get that moment where they sort of like lean back in their chair and they're like, well, we do have this other thing going on. So regardless which way you come at it, the important thing is it's the relevance of the problem that matters. And we've got to get to the source of truth on that before they've already landed in status quo. So engineer your sales process to do it that way.
I love that. That's an excellent question.
Right?
Definitely gonna take that one. Okay, so Dan, let us know if that was helpful, and then we'll go to Rebecca as we have about 4 minutes left here. How do you involve higher decision makers? They have to present to a board or funding group who is only focused on price and not value. Okay, I got to dive right in. This is my favorite question, and people are shook when every time I ask it. They're like, "Wait, hold up, like." That was actually a good question, right? This will get them excited. So most people, they'll be like, "Hey, does that make sense? Do you have any questions for me? Like, are we good?" Like, that's not it. Don't do that. When we already know they have to go talk to people, right? And so I actually precede at the beginning of the conversation. I say, hey, up for a contract, I say, hey, this conversation typically goes 2 ways. One is we move forward because you find this is actually worth solving, and we need to go talk to, I don't know, Sally and Bobby because they're the CMO and the head of content, or you don't like what I have to say at all, and you can just say no throughout this call, right? And so when I get towards the end, I say, okay, I know you have to go talk to Sally and Bobby. What information can I send you that would wow them? Now, notice the wording there. It's not just like what they would like or like what would be helpful. I'm saying wow them, like, whoa, okay, we got to do this. So when you have that language, it gets people to really think like, yeah, like what would wow them? That's interesting. Now we're in a different conversation. So I wanted to add that layer because it's important.
I love that. I think one of the things that I also neglected is like we tend in sales to speak in solution speak versus
Mhm.
executives speak in problem speak. So they don't care the bells and whistle. We all know that. They don't care about the bells and whistles of the solution. What they care about is, if we solve this problem, will it make a meaningful dent in the things that I have to talk about upwards to the board, the investors, whomever. And so one of the biggest moves that I wish, again, I would have made sooner is pay very close attention to what we are sending. Is our follow-up all about our solution, or are we actually helping them size that problem, make that case for them? Because if an executive comes to me and says, I want to buy, I don't know, this call recording software right now,
Right.
it's like all I see and hear are dollar signs. And what is that? What dollars are that taking away from? But if the executive comes in and says, we've got a massive problem because our managers have a 12-to-1 rep manager
Mhm.
ratio, and there's
Right.
no way we're able to coach to these deals and able to get ahead of it. Like that's a different language in which executives like to speak. So I think just pay close attention to how we're talking in those follow-ups.
Fantastic. Do we have one more question left? Okay, this is literally speed. I mean, this is actually probably okay. Speed round here, right? As we
Oh,
wrap
shoot.
it up. Oh,
I think we're
all
gonna
right.
have time. So I was like,
Oh,
damn
sick.
it.
All right. Well, then we could do that. I mean, if you answer it like super fast, you can. You're already on it, so never mind. This one I feel like is a lot more longer-winded, but if we want to quickly do this, right? For industries that go into RFP bid in Q4 for Q1, any advice on getting notice other than competing against price? I actually don't have any context here. I didn't have to ever really do RFPs or bids, so I don't know if you have anything on this, Jen.
Yeah, and I'll do it real quick because I see we're ending in 18. Lead with what they missed. Don't just respond to what they asked for. I did this all the time. If you're in an RFP and that's the first time you've heard about it, you've already lost the deal. There's nothing else to lose. Lead with what they missed in their analysis of the problem. First page.
Awesome. Well, as we wrap up, Jen, where can people find you?
LinkedIn, baby. Or if you want really poor TikTok content, you can try to find me on there, but I don't even tell people my name because it's that bad. But LinkedIn, Jen Allen-Knuth.
Wait, so now you leave people a clue to go find you on
Yes.
TikTok, but not the
Yes.
username?
It's my secret.
I love that. I love that. All right, y'all. Hopefully you enjoyed this session. You got something out of it, something to help you out moving forward going into the weekend and for the rest of the year for these power plays. All we ask is for you to use one of these power plays to help you out. Hope you all have a fantastic rest of your day and catch you all soon. Cheers, everybody.
Thank you.